My cell phone slipped right out of my hand and hit the floor with a heavy thud. The screen was still glowing, showing the picture. It was my daughter, Hope, in a wedding gown, smiling beside a man I barely knew. Hope, did you get married? Yeah, Mama, yesterday. On the other end of the line, I could hear the sounds of the street, cars passing, footsteps, voices, everything except any real excitement. Why didn't you tell me? Why wasn't I invited? It was just a small thing, Mama, only family. That word hammered inside my head. Family. I picked up the phone, stared at that frozen smile on the screen, and finally understood. Maybe I'd become an afterthought, a detail left outside the frame. I deleted the picture, and in the silence that remained, a question formed that I still can't answer. What does a mother do when she stops being family? My name is Clara May Harrison, and for 67 years I believed family was everything. I raised my daughter Hope alone after my husband Elijah passed away. I worked cleaning houses for two different families, the Rodwells and the Millers, to pay for her college. I saved every single dollar so she could have the wedding of her dreams. I always imagined I would be right there beside her at the altar, holding her hand and watching her live the biggest dream any woman could have. But last Tuesday, as I was having my morning coffee and checking my phone, I saw a picture on Facebook that changed everything. There was Hope in a white dress next to her husband, Devin Hayes. The only people with them were his parents, Franklin and Eleanor Hayes. My eyes scanned every detail of that image multiple times. Hope looked radiant, smiling like I'd never seen her smile before. And the caption read, "Our special day, family complete." Family complete without me. There was no invitation, no conversation, no explanation. I found out my daughter got married the same way any stranger finds out news on the internet. My heart broke in a way I hadn't even felt when Elijah passed. Sitting there in my kitchen in Atlanta with the mug shaking in my hand, I realized that to Hope, I might no longer exist as a mother, but merely as an inconvenient memory of the past. I called her 3 times that day. They all went straight to voicemail. I sent messages pretending I hadn't seen anything, asking if everything was okay, if she needed anything. The response only came late that afternoon. "I'm fine, Mama. We'll talk later. We'll talk later." As if her own daughter's wedding was a minor issue that could be put off. That night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized I had spent my entire life being a mother to someone who no longer needed me. And in that silence of the early morning, a new Clara May began to wake up inside me. Over the next few days, memories came rushing in like ocean waves. I remembered when Hope was 5 years old and got pneumonia. I worked all day cleaning the Rodwell family's home in Buckhead and sewed at night for the Miller family in Sandy Springs. For 15 days, I barely slept 3 hours a night, taking care of her, driving her to the doctor, buying those expensive medicines. When she finally recovered, she hugged me and said, "Mama, when I grow up, I'm going to get married, and you're going to be the prettiest maid of honor in the world." Those words had lived in my heart for more than 20 years. I also remembered her sweet 16 party. I had been saving for 2 years to throw her a memorable celebration. I sold some jewelry from my marriage. I worked extra shifts on the weekends. I deprived myself of basic things. We rented the Magnolia Room in the Midtown neighborhood. I bought the most beautiful dress I could find. I hired a great DJ. I prepared all the soul food myself. That day, Hope told me I was the best mother in the world, that she would remember everything I had done for her forever. The guests commented that the love was visible in every detail of the party. I thought about the everyday sacrifices. The mornings I got up at 5 to make her breakfast before school. The afternoons I spent helping her with homework, even though I hadn't finished high school myself. The nights I stayed awake waiting for her when she was out with friends, worrying about her safety. The Sundays I brought a pot of collard greens and ham hocks to Auntie Dolores's house so Hope could spend time with her father's family. When she went to college to study business administration, I increased my work hours. I cleaned the Rodwell's house Monday through Friday, and on weekends I worked catering social events, serving tables. I wanted her to focus only on studying, not worrying about money. Every time my knees ached after so many hours on my feet or when my hands cracked from cleaning, I thought about the bright future Hope would have thanks to her education. During those college years, she began to change subtly. She didn't come straight home after class anymore. She had study sessions, group projects, extracurricular activities. On weekends, she went out with friends to places that were completely foreign to me. When I asked about her day, the answers got shorter, more distant. It was fine, Mama. I'll tell you later, but later never came. It was during her final year of college that she met Devin Hayes. The first time she mentioned him, I noticed a special light in her eyes. She talked about him constantly, how smart he was, how he came from a good family, how he had ambitious plans for the future. I was happy to see her happy, but I also felt a pang of something I couldn't identify. Then it felt as if Devin represented a world I didn't belong to, a future where there wouldn't be space for a mother who cleaned other people's homes. The first time Devin came over for dinner, I cooked baked mac and cheese, fried chicken, candied yams, cornbread, and sweet tea. I put in more effort than ever. I wanted to make a good impression. Devin was polite and courteous, but I noticed his eyes scanning our small home with an expression I couldn't decipher. Hope seemed nervous, constantly explaining things as if she had to justify our way of living. "Your house is very nice, Mrs. Harrison," Devin said when he left. But there was something in his tone that made me feel like he had said the opposite. That night, Hope told me I'd been too intense, asking so many questions about his family, his job, and his plans. "Mama, not everyone is like us, sharing their whole life in the first conversation." That was the first time I felt I was being viewed as a problem to solve. From then on, Devin's visits became less frequent. When he came, the conversations were more superficial, more formal. Hope started spending more time with him, coming home later and later. Sunday family gatherings became occasional, then sporadic, until they disappeared completely. "Devin and I have plans" became the most common phrase in her vocabulary. When Hope graduated, I was so proud I cried through the entire ceremony. She had achieved what I never could, finishing a college degree. She was going to have opportunities I never had. After graduation, we went to celebrate at a nice restaurant in Decatur. Devin had also invited his parents, Franklin and Eleanor Hayes. It was the first time I met them formally. Franklin was a manager at a big company in Sandy Springs. Eleanor had been a teacher for many years before retiring. They talked about trips, fancy restaurants, and Broadway shows. I tried to participate in the conversation, but I felt like a fish out of water. When I mentioned that I worked cleaning houses, there was an awkward silence that Hope quickly filled by changing the subject. That night, when we got home, Hope said something that hurt me deeply. "Mama, I know you always try to be friendly, but sometimes you say things that can be misinterpreted. Devin's parents are very refined people." Refined? That word stuck in my mind. I wasn't refined. My love, my sacrifice, my dedication, they didn't count for anything compared to money and formal education. The following months were marked by increasing distance. Hope got a job at a big international company. Devin also had a good job. They started talking about getting their own place, renting an apartment together. I supported the idea, though my heart was breaking inside. "Young people need their space," I said, faking enthusiasm. When they finally moved into an exclusive part of Atlanta, I was still welcome, but with schedules and conditions. "Mama, you better call before you come over to see if we're around," Hope told me. The spontaneity of simply showing up to visit my daughter was gone forever. Now I had to make an appointment as if I were visiting a doctor or a dentist. The visits became more and more spaced out. First every week, then every 2 weeks, then once a month. When I went, the conversation mainly revolved around their jobs, their plans, their friends. I listened with interest, but they rarely asked about my life. It was as if I only existed for them as Hope's mother. During the holiday season last year, I noticed Hope and Devin had started spending more time with the Hayes family. "Well, Devin's parents have really beautiful traditions," Hope explained when I asked if they would come over for Christmas Eve dinner as we had always done. "But next year we'll host, right?" Next year never came. Or rather, it came without me. It was in February when Hope told me she and Devin were thinking about getting married. "That's wonderful, baby," I exclaimed, feeling a mix of joy and anticipation. I immediately started making mental plans. The church, the dress, the flowers, the food. Have you set a date? How can I help? Mama, we want something simple, Hope said. But there was something evasive in her look. Nothing too elaborate. Weddings aren't as complicated as they used to be. I nodded, though I felt a small disappointment inside. I dreamed for years of helping to plan my only daughter's wedding. The months passed and conversations about the wedding became vague and sporadic. When I asked about specific details, Hope always had the same answer. We're still looking into it, Mama. I'll let you know as soon as we have something finalized. I started to feel like something wasn't right, but I didn't know what exactly. In May, I noticed Hope started posting more photos on Facebook. Pictures with Devin, with the haze, at fancy restaurants in places I didn't recognize. But when we saw each other in person, she told me very little about these events. It was as if she had two parallel lives, one she shared with me and one she lived in secret. It was early June when I started to suspect something was definitely going on. Hope canceled 3 dates in a row to see me, always with excuses about work or urgent commitments. When we finally met, she seemed distracted, nervous. I asked her directly if everything was okay with Devin, if there was a problem. Everything is perfect, Mama, she said, not looking me in the eye. It's just that we're so busy with work and other things. Other things? Those words resonated in my mind for days. What other things could be more important than including her mother in her life? The last time I spoke to Hope before discovering the truth was on a Sunday afternoon. I called to invite her to breakfast the following Tuesday. I can't, Mama, she said. I have a very important meeting that morning. That was odd because Tuesday mornings had always been our special time since she was little. It was the only day of the week I didn't work at the Rodwell's house. How about Wednesday then? I insisted. I don't know, Mama. Let me check my schedule and I'll call you back. But she never called me back. And I, as I always had, waited patiently for her call that never came. It was that Tuesday morning, exactly when I should have been having breakfast with my daughter, that I sat down in my kitchen with my coffee and a slice of pecan Danish. I logged onto Facebook to see photos of my neighbors and their grandkids, and I stumbled upon the image that would change my life forever. There was Hope, more beautiful than ever, in a simple but elegant wedding dress, smiling next to Devin in what was clearly a marriage ceremony. In the background were the happy faces of Franklin and Eleanor Hayes, dressed elegantly, posing as the only witnesses to that moment that should have been mine too. The photo description read, "Finally married. Thank you to our families for making this day perfect." Our families in plural, but I didn't appear anywhere. I wasn't in the picture. I wasn't in the comments. I wasn't in that story that was supposed to include my entire life. I read every comment on that post. College friends congratulating, coworkers sending blessings, some distant relatives expressing surprise that they hadn't heard about the wedding. But no comment mentioned my absence. It was as if I had never existed in Hope's life, as if those 28 years of sacrifice and love had been completely erased from her personal story. I spent the rest of that day in a state of shock. I checked my phone over and over, hoping for a call, a text, an explanation. Nothing. Hope had gone on with her normal life, posting honeymoon photos, thanking people for congratulations, sharing moments of happiness from which I had been completely excluded. That night, lying awake and looking at the ceiling of my small bedroom, I understood something that hurt more than I imagined possible. My daughter hadn't forgotten to include me in her wedding. She had consciously excluded me. She had made a deliberate choice that I would not be part of the most important day of her life. And in that moment of painful clarity, I knew that my life, as I had known it until then, was over forever. But what Hope didn't know was that her mother, Clara May, had stored up much more than just pain during all those years of sacrifice. She had also stored a strength she herself didn't know she possessed, a dignity that had been dormant but never dead, and a capacity for decision that was about to change everything forever. The woman who got out of that bed on Wednesday morning was no longer the same woman who had patiently waited to be included in her daughter's life. She was a woman who had finally understood that some absences speak louder than any presence, and that sometimes the greatest love a mother can show is respect for her own dignity. In that silent pre dawn hour in Atlanta, as the bells of St. Jude's Episcopal Church rang at 3 a.m., Clara Mae Harrison made the first completely self directed decision she had made in nearly 30 years. If she was no longer welcome in Hope's life, then Hope would no longer be welcome in hers. But this story was just beginning, and what came next would change the lives of everyone involved in ways none of them could have imagined. The following days passed in a dense fog that prevented me from clearly seeing where my life was headed. Hope didn't call to explain, didn't show up at the house, didn't show any sign of remorse. She continued posting honeymoon photos from Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, as if nothing had happened, as if I were just another follower on her social media. Every new photo was a confirmation that I truly was no longer a part of her life. I tried to keep busy with household chores, with Wednesday Mass at St. Jude's, with talks with Mrs. Eleanor Rodriguez, my lifelong neighbor. But no matter how much I tried to hide it, the pain was always there, causing a deep ache in my chest like a constant presence that made it hard to breathe. It was while sorting through old papers in the wooden trunk that had belonged to my mother that the memories came rushing back in full force. I found birth certificates, immunization records that I'd kept so carefully, and school report cards where Hope always got straight A's. I remembered every sacrifice. The early morning sewing dresses for ladies in the neighborhood to pay for Hope's English classes. The times I ate nothing but toast and jam so she could have meat on her plate. The birthday gifts I saved for all year to buy. I recalled the times she came home crying because her friends had designer clothes, and I would go to the Sweet Auburn curb market the next day to buy exactly what she wanted, even if it meant delaying the rent that month. Through all those years, Hope always had an excuse for not fully including me in her life. First, it was her studies, then work, then her boyfriend Devin, who didn't get along with mothers in law. I always accepted. I always understood. I always adapted to her schedule, her whims, her decisions. But now looking back, I realized that I had become smaller and smaller in her life, occupying increasingly minimal spaces until I reached the point of not even knowing she was getting married. The Hope I raised, the one I loved unconditionally, the one I always put first, had become a stranger who only shared crumbs of attention with me when it suited her. That Thursday afternoon, as I organized family photos into a shoebox, I found one that made me cry harder than I had cried in years. It was from Hope's confirmation ceremony. She was 8 years old. She wore a beautiful white dress that I had asked a local seamstress to make. In the photo, Hope was hugging me tightly and smiling with a pure, genuine happiness. I was smiling too. But now I could see in my eyes from that time something I had lost, the certainty that I was loved unconditionally by my daughter. I remembered that day perfectly. I had saved for 6 months for that celebration. I rented the Magnolia Room Hall. I invited the whole family. I prepared barbecue, potato salad, sweet tea, and a huge red velvet cake I specially ordered. Hope felt like a princess, running from table to table, introducing me to everyone as my mama, the most beautiful in the world. That night, when everyone had left, she helped me pick up the dishes and said, "Mama, when I grow up and have my own parties, you're always going to be the most important person. Always." Tears ran down my cheeks as I held that photograph. What happened to that little girl who promised me I would always be the most important person? When did I become so insignificant that I didn't even deserve to be present at her wedding? I continued looking through the photos and found another one that hurt just as much. Hope at 15, the day of her sweet 16 party. We had rented a hall in the Midtown neighborhood. There was a DJ, food for 50 people, and a live band for the waltz. I had worked double shifts for a whole year to give her that party. I cleaned houses by day, babysat children at night, sold sweet potato pies at the farmer's market on weekends, all to see her happy, to give her the celebration she deserved. In that photo, Hope and I were dancing together, mother and daughter, during one of the songs. She had asked me to play a song she called our special song. "Mama, you used to sing this to me when I was little and sick, and it always made me feel better," she had told me. "I want us to dance to it together so everyone knows how much I love you." Those words echoed in my mind like sounds from another life. How had I gone from being the person who comforted her when she was sick to being someone she was ashamed of in front of her new family? I kept looking and found a letter Hope had written me when she was 18, just before starting college. She had written it on pink paper with careful handwriting full of little drawn hearts in the margins. It read, "Dearest Mama, tomorrow I start a new stage in my life. But I want you to know that nothing I achieve will be possible without everything you have done for me. You are my hero, my role model, the bravest woman I know. When I grow up, I want to be a mother like you, loving, sacrificial, who always puts family first. I love you with all my heart, and you will always be the most important person in my life. Your loving daughter, Hope." I read that letter 3 times before I could believe what I was reading. This was the same person who had just excluded me from the most important day of her life. The same one who had promised me I would always be the most important person. I sat on my bed with the letter shaking in my hands and cried like I hadn't cried since the day I buried Elijah. I cried for the girl who wrote those words and for the woman she had become. I cried for all the dreams I had about being the mother of the bride. I cried for all the times I imagined helping her choose the dress, organizing the bridal shower, walking her down the aisle. I cried for the mother-daughter relationship I thought we had, which apparently only existed in my imagination. After the crying came the rage, a rage I had never felt in my 67 years. How dare she treat me like this after everything I had done for her? How could she be so cruel, so ungrateful? I had sacrificed my youth, my social life, my own dreams, all for her. I had worked until my bones ached so she could have opportunities I never had. And this was how she repaid me, with humiliation, exclusion, and oblivion. But after the rage came something worse: shame. I started asking myself if somehow it was my fault. Had I been too intense, too clingy, too unsophisticated for Hope's new refined life? I remembered the faces of Franklin and Eleanor Hayes when they met me. That subtle expression I hadn't been able to interpret then, but that I now understood clearly: pity mixed with discomfort. To them, I was the embarrassing mother-in-law who had to be tolerated, not accepted. I got up from the bed and looked at myself in the vanity mirror. There was Clara May Harrison, 67 years old, gray hair, hands rough from so much work, wrinkles around my eyes that spoke of years of worry. I wasn't elegant like Eleanor Hayes. I hadn't traveled the world. I didn't speak any other languages. I didn't know about fine wines or theater. I was a simple woman who had done the best she could with what she had. But did that make me less valuable? Did that justify my own daughter treating me like I didn't exist? I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake thinking about all the signs I had ignored, all the moments I should have realized I was losing my daughter, the family dinners that became sporadic, the phone calls that got shorter, the visits that required prior appointment. Everything had been gradual, so subtle that I hadn't realized I was being systematically excluded from Hope's life. On Friday morning, I decided to call my sister, Auntie Rosa, who lives in Birmingham, Alabama. I needed to talk to someone, vent, ask for advice. Auntie Rosa had always been the most direct of my sisters, the one who told things straight. "She got married without telling you?" Auntie Rosa shouted when I told her what had happened. "That girl is crazy. How can a daughter do that to her mother?" I told her the whole story, from the first changes in Hope's attitude to the discovery of the wedding on Facebook. Auntie Rosa listened without interrupting, which was rare for her. "Clara May," she finally said in a serious voice, "I always told you that you gave too much to that girl. You spoiled her since she was little. You put her on a pedestal, and now you see the consequences. Kids need boundaries. They need to understand that respect is earned and maintained." Her words hurt because I knew they contained some truth. I had always indulged Hope. I had always given in to her tantrums. I had always put her needs before mine. But I had done it out of love because I wanted her to have everything I couldn't have. "So, what am I supposed to do now?" I asked, sobbing. "Now you're going to do what you should have done years ago. You're going to live for yourself," Auntie Rosa replied firmly. Hope has already made her decision about what place you occupy in her life. Now it's your turn to decide what place she occupies in yours. After hanging up with Auntie Rosa, I sat in the kitchen for hours thinking about her words. She was right. Hope had clearly demonstrated what place I occupied in her new life. None. It was time for me to also make a decision about what place she would occupy in my new life. On Saturday morning, as I drank my coffee and ate my pecan Danish, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but when I answered, I heard Hope's voice. "Mama, how are you?" she asked in a cheerful voice, as if nothing had happened. Guess what? We're back from our honeymoon. Cabo was amazing. Devin and I want to stop by this afternoon to tell you everything.